In this lesson, we'll create a sink object and use it to remove fluids from our simulation. So I'm starting with a clean, brand new Houdini scene, and I'm going to create a flip tank right in the middle of the origin. So I just want to hit Control and click on the flip tank. Again, holding down Control while clicking the shelf tool just creates the object right at the center of the universe here, center of our scene. So we know if we have our flip tank and we hit play that nothing really happens. The particles may settle just a little bit, but really there's no movement to the fluid, hardly at all. How do I get that fluid to actually escape the tank? In other words, what if this was a kitchen sink or a bathtub? And in the bottom of that bathtub, there was a drain, and somebody pulled the plug on the drain. How would I make the fluid drain out of this particular flip tank? Well, we do it using something called a sink object. Now, a sink object can literally be any piece of geometry of any shape and size. I'm going to go ahead now and we'll just create a tube. I'm going to look in my side view, so let's set our view to the right viewport. We'll move our tube down so it's got just a little bit of it sticking out of the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and dive inside the tube and close up the ends. So I'm going to go ahead and give it end caps. And if we look back in our perspective view, all that does is simply put a lid on both ends. All right, so it just adds a top to it, a top and bottom. So now it's closed in, it's a full tube. So we have a solid shape here sitting at the bottom of our flip tank. Now we create a sink object out of it by using some of the shelf tools. I have nothing selected whatsoever, and I'm sitting here at the object level. So I want to create a sink, so I'm going to click on the icon Sink from Objects. Now I'm prompted here first to select the objects for Sink from Objects. Now I want that to be my tube, so I make sure that I have it selected, and I'm going to tap Enter. And then I'm prompted to now select the fluid or fluid box to add the sink to. Well, this is the fluid that I want to add it to, so I make sure that I have it selected, and I hit Enter. Now a lot of things have happened here, some things have been created. Let's take a look around real quick before we hit play, just so we know for sure what's happened. Now at the object level, nothing really has changed. We still have our fluid tank initial, the fluid interior, and the fluid tank fluid. Now we've discussed all of these nodes before. So what really has happened, let's look inside the Autodop network for answers. So I'm going to hit L, that'll lay out my nodes. And you can see here that inside the Autodop network, we actually have our flip tank, only here on the very last input of sourcing, we have this source sink from object. Okay? And that node, that volume, has been initialized as sink flip, which basically means eat the particles. So let's come back out here now. I'm going to pan around so we can see a little bit better. Let's make sure we have real-time playback enabled, and we'll hit play. So you can see now what's happening. The tube in the middle has been converted into a volume that's basically just eating the particles out of the simulation. As the particles get eaten and taken out of the simulation, the other particles rush in to fill its place, much like a sink would if it was draining. So basically, any shape that you create can be turned into a sink, a particle eater, if you will. If we extend our timeline just a little bit here, I'm going to go ahead and go into Animation Options. And instead of 240 frames, we'll go ahead and give it a big 480. Apply that. Close. And we'll just let our sink play for a little bit longer. Now, the question is, what if I need to eat those particles up at a faster rate? Well, if you need to, you can make a bigger sink. So all you have to do now, since we already have the tube shape, is if you want a bigger hole in the bottom, just make your tube bigger. So I'm just going to use the tube shape uniform scale and make it a 2. So now we have twice as big a hole that we're punching in the bottom of our simulation. So now when we rewind and play back, we lose that sink very quickly. The particles leave the scene. I mean, it's really eating up particles very, very fast. So the size of your sink can really, really make a difference in how quickly it eats up the particles and takes away the particles from your fluid. So that's one way that we can actually remove particles from our scene. We wanted to drain a sink or a bathtub. But how do we just push them around a little bit? Just give them a little nudge here and there. Well, that we do with a pump, and that we'll look at next.